The freight elevator, with my name on the service call. The work order looked like any other. A PDF spooled from a system that prefers numbers to nouns. A ticket that knew my email better than I know my future. Except the subject line behaved like a dare. Service call, freight elevator for Liam. Underneath the line where a building usually hides its address, someone had typed a sentence that systems aren't built to hold. Loading dock B. 11:40 p.m. Ask for A. It was already 10:55. The job wore the urgency of a lock that could pick itself. I'm a locksmith by trade, the boring miracle kind. I repin cylinders people swear are haunted. I coax doors that have decided to be memories. I teach aluminum how to forgive. My shop smells like graphite and 1,000 keys that never wanted to be special. Marco, the man I split rent and olives with, runs a kitchen that has learned to say its own name in 5 courses. He's the executive chef of a rooftop restaurant that thinks it can convince gravity to applaud. 4 years in, we keep 2 glasses by the sink because we built a rule out of water. Pour before the sentence that changes a day. He'd come home at dusk wearing the exhausted swagger of someone who spent 12 hours teaching heat to stay polite. He kissed the back of my neck with the accuracy of a man who knows the map, then missed the half-inch that matters. He said there was a late tasting for select press and a donor with opinions about plate height. He smelled like cedar and a lobby that sells permission. He took a shower like he was rinsing off a decision and left a towel folded with restaurant neatness on the stool. I told myself I didn't need a reservation to know a room. At 11:28, I was walking past the loading docks of the Harrington Tower with a tool roll under my arm. Night in that part of the city wears concrete for perfume. The service lane was lit the way honesty likes, a bare bulb that agreed to do its job without applause. Loading dock B had a buzzer panel scabbed to the wall, its buttons labeled with tape and confidence. I pressed the top one. The speaker coughed once and decided to be helpful. "Who's there?" The voice had a curve in it I recognized from rooms that like velvet. "Service call for the freight elevator," I said. "For Liam." Silence, then the kind of click that announces a hinge has just paid attention to your future. The door unlocked. Inside, the corridor was a compromise between plumbing and ambition. At the end of the hall stood a man I'd seen from a distance and tried not to memorize. Adrian Valdez, the building's general manager, the kind of person who can make a donor feel like they invented taste. Taller up close, a tie loosened an inch, a shirt open 1 notch beyond practical. He smelled like cedar and the last minute of a lobby. "You came," he said. Not a victory, relief that gravity had kept its promise. "You wrote my name on a service call," I said, and held up my phone as if an email could be a badge. The building pretended to be innocent. He let his mouth have the ghost of a smile. "Freight elevator threw an error after an extra delivery," he said, which in this city is how men say confession. He thinks he's meeting me here to end something politely after the tasting. "I thought you should have the room first." "How long?" I asked, because cutting beats embroidery when blood is taking notes. 8 months, he said. Buildings appreciate round numbers. Rain and a stuck elevator the night the rooftop liquor license came through. A lobby that sells permission with carpet. I ended it twice. He sent me a photo of your coffee cup ring on the counter with a complaint about the bar stools. I respected the sentence against my better judgment. He turned and led me through the short hallway into the freight bay. The elevator loomed like a polite threat, iron gate folded back, the car's interior paneled in scuffed steel. 2 paper cups sat on a pallet as if water were a ritual that could be rehearsed. Marco's jacket, navy, frayed at the cuff where he grips pans too hard, hung from a hook on the wall. My hand hovered over the shoulder seam and retreated. Fabric shouldn't be forced to testify. Adrian stepped closer without closing the last inch. His hand lifted toward my wrist and stopped in that explicit air where stories audition to be mistakes. He chose a language my ethics don't speak. He didn't touch me. The restraint was indecent and kind in the same breath. "I didn't invite you for absolution," he said. "Secrets act heavy until you set them in the right air. Freight bays are good air." The big door at the other end rolled and stuttered, then lifted. Marco stepped down from the tail of someone's pride, sleek catering van in disguise, with the face he uses for investors, precise, competent, a volume strangers trust without remembering why. He saw me. He saw Adrian. He saw the cups and the jacket and the inch of charged air. He didn't look at the pallet jack because professionals know where to let their eyes loose on purpose. He closed the door behind him gently. Hinges deserve dignity. "Okay," he said. The word put its tools on the table. "You could have kept the building out of our kitchen," I said. "You chose not to." "I chose incompetence," he said, and in another room I might have loved him for the noun. "And then cowardice. I cheated. I told myself it was weather and that home is a noun that survives rain. I told myself you're elastic because you fix stubborn things. I called the spark structure. I can stop performing a justification and start doing the job." Adrian drifted toward the call button with the posture of a man who knows both exits and patience. He lifted his hand a second time, almost to my neck, stopped at that inch, and lowered it as if returning a borrowed word. Heat stayed where it had written its small thesis. "What do you want me to do?" Marco asked. He didn't reach. I saw his hands want to and abstain, like a chef watching a line cook salt too soon. "You'll end it," I said. "You'll sleep on the couch we refuse to call a guest anything. Next week you'll tell me what this was twice. Once with your restaurant voice that can spackle narrative, once with small words. I'll decide what my hands can hold without lying to my wrists." "I'll do that," he said. The freight elevator hummed like a room practicing apology. Adrian exhaled and closed the last step until breath had the right to draw a map on my skin. He put his mouth near my ear without letting it touch. The warmth rearranged some furniture and left no mess. "Thank you for not making me a scene," he said. "We both would have believed you." He walked to the door, pushed it open with a hand that knew how to be gentle with steel, and left without making punctuation out of hardware. I set my tool roll on the pallet because something should do the job it came for. The elevator's screen blinked an error I could name in my sleep. I climbed into the car, lifted the control panel with a practiced economy, and pressed a reset sequence the way you say small words to a complicated day. The relay clicked. The motor thought about the ways it had been asked to be heroic and decided to try honesty instead. The numbers began to behave. "Cab's ready," I said, stepping out. "We can use it without pretending it's art." We didn't ride. Standing would have turned into posture. We sat on opposite sides of the pallet like men preventing a fire. The cups sweated with a decency I appreciated. Somewhere above us, the kitchen sent down a sheet pan that smelled like garlic and nerves. "I'm not leaving tonight," I said. "We'll walk home without touching. We'll wait at crosswalks because other people's knees and our better natures both deserve seconds. You'll sleep on the couch. Tomorrow you'll end it without complimenting him. Next week you'll bring me small words." He nodded. He didn't cry. I still love him for that. We stood when a porter with headphones asked if we needed help and decided we didn't. We walked the service corridor to the night door. The alley tasted like rain that couldn't be bothered. A cyclist cut too close at the curb and Marco's palm hovered near my hip, offering me a mercy I could want and refuse. I refused. A man gets to choose the boring tool that keeps the lock from lying. At home, the kettle auditioned and then behaved. He arranged blankets on the couch with a Miss C in place of guilt and care. I slept in our bed like a mechanism I hadn't tested. In the morning, he came back from the rooftop smelling like nothing, the cologne adulthood should hand out for free. He told me he'd ended it. He told me the truth twice. First with menu language, the sequence, the scarcity, the design. Then with small words that didn't ask forgiveness to work overtime. He said he liked being two men because one didn't have to be tired. He said Spark had impersonated structure and he hadn't checked ID. He said he could be one person if I let him do the work. I let him. That is the unmarketable part. He slept on the couch for 6 nights and learned the distance between our door and our bed like a route he wasn't going to brag about. On the 7th, he came to me with hands that remembered the lazy precision we taught each other before we mistook adrenaline for architecture. There is an erotic that arrives shyly as restraint. There is a thrill in choosing not to ruin morning. Adrian texted 2 days later, "Thank you for telling the truth in a room built for deliveries." I wrote back, "Try it where nothing is being unloaded." He didn't reply, which was the second best thing he did. Work stayed exact. A woman brought me a brass mailbox key that had taken retirement into its own hands. I filed its shoulders until the tumblers decided to be cooperative. A boy brought a bike chain lock frozen by winter, and I taught him how to warm a stubborn cylinder without setting his thesis on fire. He watched the plug rotate and looked at me like I'd invented consequence. A landlord wanted master keys that made everyone subordinate, and I refused the job with a sentence about safety that made me sound like someone I wouldn't have believed at 22. A week later, I saw Adrian on the mezzanine above the dining room, showing an inspector the place where a handrail pretended to be art. He looked smaller. Maybe my anger had stopped needing him to be tall. He said hello without asking to hold my afternoon hostage. He didn't smell like cedar. The space between us decided it liked being boring. He left without auditioning for a moral. Here's the part people tell badly because it refuses to sell tickets. I wanted him. I wanted the inch, the heat, the way his restraint wrote a grammar on my skin, subject, verb, decide. I wanted to make a mistake I could narrate neatly and regret in a way that sounded good. I didn't. Wanting is a sentence, not a command. Bodies vote. Ethics count. Boredom is a mercy that lets you like yourself at noon. Marco and I adjusted the frame. 2 glasses before 3 sentences. Less reach, better touch when we chose it. We stopped letting the kettle decide tone. At service, he left his phone face down in the office like a man who had learned not to confuse applause with policy. At home, we stood near the fire escape during arguments not because we planned to flee, but because air helps rooms remember how to be generous. If another work order arrives with my name stapled to someone else's hour, I will bring water. I will stand where the exit is obvious and refuse to call that cowardice. If a hand lifts toward my neck, I will let the inch exist and answer with a decision I can carry past morning. I will keep choosing verbs that keep us possible. End, stay, tell, work, touch, wait. And when I seat fresh pins and feel a cylinder turn the way a day decides to, when a door opens because both sides cooperated instead of one stealing, I will think about the freight elevator humming itself back to behavior, and the night we declined a finale in a room built for moving weight, and I will call that deliberate air the most difficult thing I know how to make, and the one that still holds when daylight forgets its lines.